Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio show. The medical marijuana for you and me. Ah, yeah, the medical marijuana. Whoa, 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 ah, yeah, the medical. It's the medical marijuana show. You will know.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Medical Marijuana Radio for Saturday, the 10th of January, 2015. I'm your host, Larry Love, and we're here every Saturday night. Tonight we're doing it live. We pre-recorded the last few weeks due to some technical problems and the holidays and so forth, but we're back live, and of course we want your calls. I gave out the numbers a little while ago. I'll give you one now. 505-514-0098. Again, 505-514-0098. We'd like to make this a weekly forum for patients out there and activists to talk about what's on their minds in regard to cannabis from all around the world, whether it's adult use or medical. It's important that we share this information. Tonight's guest that we'll be sharing information from is Michael Krawitz, who is a veteran, who is an activist for veterans and an activist for cannabis. He travels all over the globe, enlightening and teaching about how this plant helps people. So at the bottom of the hour, we'll have Michael Krawitz on as our guest. But first, like we do every week, here in New Mexico, we read you the strain report. And if you want to find the strains that you need and you like, you better shop around.
You better shop around. Oh, yeah, you better shop around. Shop around.
Ah-ha-ha. And starting this Tuesday, Cannaceutics down in Albuquerque will have Pineapple Skunk, Boss Hog, Cataract Kush, Lemon Thai Kush, Zero Gravity, Pandora's Box, and Trainwreck. Again, that's Cannaceutics. Also down south in the Albuquerque area, CG Corrigan. I think they're in Placitas. Their indicas are Grape Ape, Gorilla Grape, LA Confidential, Master Kush, Purple Kush crossed with Headband, and True Gold. Their sativas are sorry about that, folks. Alaskan Thunderfuck, Amnesia, Blue Dream, Green Crack crossed with Sour Diesel, and Shipwreck. Their hybrids on the sativa dominant side are Cinderella 99, Cherry Pie, Chunky Cherry Malawi, Deadhead OG, Flow, Golden Goat, Love Train, New York Diesel, Pineapple Express, Power Plant, Sage and Sour, and X-Rated. They're hybrids at CG Corrigan that are indica dominant, Cali Headband, Cookie, Fire Alien Strawberry, God's Gift, Grand Platinum, Northern Lights, Pineapple Skunk, Ray Charles, and Williams Wonder. Their CBD strains are Ato de Madre, AK-47, Canatonic, and Champagne. That is CG Corrigan. Up here at New Mexican Natural Medicine, who opened up their really state-of-the-art, lifting the bar for everybody else in this state, their campus, their dispensary. They're going to have classes. They're going to be teaching things. I'm hoping to maybe even broadcast live from there, one of their seminars. Beautiful place up here in Santa Fe. Check it out. Their prices are always a little bit lower than everybody as well. They like to pass it back to the patients. This week they will have Mega Jackpot, Black Magic Woman, Amnesia Trance, Kush Bomb, G13 Haze, Medicine Woman, Trainwreck, Medicine Man, CBD AK-47, CBD Critical Mass, CBD Harlequin, and CBD Skunk Haze. They have popcorn bud available. Actually, they don't. Sorry, they don't have popcorn bud available this week, but maybe they will in a couple weeks. They also have available from the Red Barn Growers Sage and Sour, the Perps, and OG Kush. Again, that's New Mexican Natural Medicine up here in Santa Fe. Also in Santa Fe at New Mexico Top Organics, their bud this week: Blue Cheese, Blue Dream, Green Leaf, Purple Blockhead, lots of colors. RX, Sour Willie, Tangerine Kush, Cold Creek Kush, Flow, Jack Herer, White Widow, CBDX, and Wow. Their BHO this week is from Wonder Cream. Next up, R Greenleaf in Albuquerque, Cataract Kush, G13 Haze, Greenleaf, Kosher Kush, Super Lemon Haze, Sweet Tooth, and Wow. Again, that's R Greenleaf. And finally, and we always do this in somewhat of a alphabetical order, Sandia Botanicals, AK-47, Blue Dream, CBD Skunk Haze, Cheese, Da Perps, Jack the Ripper, Larry OG, which is a fine strain, even if it was called somebody else's OG. I grew this summer, and it's a great strain. Go ahead to Sandia Botanicals and check that out. And finally, Sour Diesel. So that's Sandia Botanicals. So that is the strain report this week. And now I've got some news for you.
1, 2, 3. I've got news for you.
So getting back to last week's show, which is was about the Department of Health's new rules meeting at the Department of Health last week ago, Monday. The local newspaper here in Santa Fe, the Santa Fe New Mexican, put out their view. It's an editorial, and it's called "Error on the Side of Compassion." And this is from last week as well. Too much energy is being spent rewriting rules for the distribution of medical marijuana in New Mexico. The State Department of Health, rather than devising cumbersome rules that make it harder for patients to get the medicine they need, should streamline the process. While the latest version of the rules is an improvement, anything would be, on the original plan, more work is needed. Compassion needs to play a role. After all, folks, it is called the Linen, Air, and Compassionate Act. They go on to say the medical cannabis program is too important to sick patients to burden it with rules that are more political than practical. Testimony from patients whose quality of life have been improved because of marijuana prescriptions is too compelling to ignore. The hearing, which took place Monday, that was the 29th of December, had 200 plus attendees with 50 people speaking. That's a lower attendance than went to an earlier hearing. In that one, criticism was so loud, the Department of Health pulled back the rules for another round of rewriting. In setting rules, the Department of Health officials would do well to remember that the medical oath of do no harm. Actually, it's first do no harm. The reality is this: medical marijuana is legal, and the state's emphasis should be on making sure there are enough producers to provide medicine and that the pot isn't being diverted for illegal uses. Other than that, we trust doctors to write recommendations. They say prescriptions, but they're wrong on that. It's called a recommendation. And patients to know what they need to handle pain or other chronic conditions. As conservatives so often argue, we don't need over-regulation by government. These are the same people, by the way, that over-regulate when they're in charge of the government. They go on to say Senator Cisco McSorley, who attended the hearing, made a compelling case for less cumbersome regulation. New Mexico's rules are so complex that patients who could benefit from marijuana are not using it. He believes that rather than the 13,000 patients enrolled now, some 60,000 would be able to participate if the state rules were less onerous. Of course, with Governor Susana Martinez opposed to marijuana use, the state has an interest in making it more difficult to use. That's the bad use of bureaucracy, especially since the real drug problem in New Mexico is misuse of prescription pain medicine, not pot. Some 830 people have submitted written comments on the proposed rule changes, which can be found online if you want to read them at www.nmhealth.org. And we will have to maybe read some of those in a future show. This program helps people who are suffering. It should be run by doctors, not government bureaucrats, with the emphasis on making marijuana accessible to sick people who need it. Again, that is an editorial in this last week's Santa Fe New Mexican here in Santa Fe. So let's go on to some other really interesting clips I have for you. Also in New Mexico, this is down in Bernalillo. This is from one of the local stations down there. Neighbors suspect marijuana nursery next door to their house.
How would you feel about having a marijuana garden in your backyard? Some New Mexicans suspect a nursery that used to grow flowers is now growing pot right next to them. Nancy Laughlin reports on why the mystery may never be solved.
In Bernalillo, there's a very large old greenhouse right off a busy road. At one time, neighbors say this was a nursery where things like roses and flowers used to bloom. Now you can't quite make out what's growing inside this place, but the people who live next to it say they have a pretty good hunch.
I don't like the idea of having this pot farm back here.
The state health department tells us there are 23 licensed pot producers in New Mexico. They say for confidentiality reasons, they won't confirm if this is one of them.
Can you smell anything unusual, or is it bothersome at all?
My son and daughter-in-law were here the other day, and they said they could smell it. I think we must have gotten used to the smell. Because I can't smell it now, you know.
Medina says what he
giggles.
can't get used to.
Feels a little bit strange having all these surveillance cameras in your backyard.
And there are now tall walls around the greenhouse, too. What we couldn't find, the name of the business. And in New Mexico, the business of medical marijuana is growing faster than a weed.
The state says right now legally licensed cannabis producers can grow up to 150 plants, but come next year, that will likely jump to 450 to keep up with supply and demand for medical marijuana.
The state health department says there's a public hearing on proposed rule changes for the medical marijuana program in Santa Fe on December 29th. But like it or not, seems Chris Medina has Mary Jane as his new neighbor.
And that was Nancy Laughlin reporting. The state won't release names of legal pot producers, so we couldn't reach out to the company running that nursery. But multiple sources say medical marijuana is growing at the greenhouse.
Okay, that's a report from one of the local stations down in Albuquerque. Over in Arizona, this is about an Arizona lawmaker proposes legalizing marijuana for adult use.
With columnist DJ Montini and reporter Richard Rellis, we see the state of Arizona advancing towards possibly recreational marijuana use. Do you think Arizona will adopt these laws?
I think we're going that direction, yeah. I think the medical marijuana is working out okay. I think there's going to be an expansion of that program a little bit. You have at least 2 bills in the legislature, one reducing the penalties for marijuana crimes, another one actually making it legal. Neither one of those will get any traction this year, but maybe by 2016 we'll have something on the ballot.
Well, I mean, voters seem to have liked medical marijuana at the ballot box. Do you think they'll also like recreational marijuana?
I think it's coming, you know. I think as people see that you know, like when a state goes to pot, it doesn't go to pot, you know. I mean, I think they're going to see that that's going to be okay. We're going to be all right. And
do you see any warning signs in Colorado as this thing's rolled out?
No, I think things are looking okay in Colorado and Washington, and I think that that's the trend, and we're sort of actually, we're not in the back end of that trend. We're actually among those more progressive areas in this particular thing. So I hope that sooner or later we get there.
You think Arizona's going to?
I think we'll get there. Yeah.
So it's looking good in other states to go recreational. Colorado, of course, has it already, and Nevada is going to be looking at it in their session in this year, and then possibly, if it doesn't pass this time, in 2016. So A lot of stuff is happening. Now, here's a report from CBS This Morning where they say the other day was a historic day on Wall Street as cannabis investors got into the action. So this is from CBS This Morning a couple days ago.
Good morning. Good morning, Gail. Until now, it's been a few very rich individuals who very quietly funded burgeoning pot companies. Today, for the first time ever, a major investment firm will put its money behind marijuana. It's a move they say will open the floodgates for more investments and an important step in the path to end pot prohibition. How big an investment are we talking about?
A multi-million-dollar investment.
Jeff Lewis's firm, Founders Fund, a $2 billion company, made its name investing early in Facebook, Spotify, and SpaceX. Now, they're betting on pot. Was there a lot of discussion in your office about this?
We discuss all our investments for a long time, so particularly in this space, obviously, we did a extra deep dive on the business.
The business is recreational marijuana, now legal in 4 states and medicinally in more than 20. Is this a watershed?
It is. It's an important milestone for us as a company, but it's really important for the entire industry.
Brendan Kennedy is CEO of Privateer Holdings, the parent company of 3 cannabis brands. Tilray, which grows marijuana in Canada, Leafly, an online database of different pot strains and stores, and Marley Natural, from the family of reggae star Bob Marley, which aims to become the Marlboro of marijuana. How difficult is it to get investment money like this now?
Raising money is always difficult, but raising money in this particular industry is the hardest thing I've ever done.
But Founders Fund is backing Kennedy's companies because they see a future in what they say is already a $40 billion business in the U.S.
One of our fundamental beliefs is that anyone who wants to consume cannabis is already consuming it.
Interesting.
We will see it transform from being a market that's based on prohibition, an illicit market, to being a fully legal, transparent, open market.
The surest way of doubling your money in investing in cannabis stocks is to fold it back over and put it back in your pocket. We have no special regulations.
UCLA professor Mark Kleeman, who studies the cannabis marketplace, warns investors, beware.
A lot of people are crowding into the marijuana industry because they think they're going to be able to sell a legal good at illegal prices. Competition's not going to allow that. Legal cannabis is going to be dirt cheap. And I think a lot of people are going to lose their shirts trying to sell it.
If they don't get arrested first. Under federal law, marijuana is still illegal. While the Department of Justice says it won't prosecute cannabis companies following state laws, that could change. Do you see any risk that sentiment could shift back here?
I don't see that risk. Over 80% of Americans believe that medical cannabis should be legal, 8 out of 10. You can't get 8 out of 10 Americans to agree on anything.
This certainly isn't a politically motivated investment. We're investing because we think it's a great business.
Early 30.
Both Lewis and Kennedy believe marijuana will be fully legal in the U.S. within a decade. As of now, there are no numbers about how many businesses have already started or how many jobs have been created, but many experts agree the marijuana market could become a $150 to $200 billion market worldwide.
So their goal is to get there first and establish an identity.
It's a beachhead, basically, and what's really important here is to have a company like Founders, which is a very established investment firm, raising the flag and saying, this is legit. We've investigated it. We're in.
We might see the floodgates open. Others jump in.
I think they'd like to see that, but as they said, it's been really hard raising money on the private funding market.
I love when he said anybody who wants to consume cannabis is already doing so, and your response was interesting. What that mean, Mr. Man? Interesting.
Thank you. You can interpret that however you want. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, once again, that was from CBS This Morning a couple of days ago. Now, before we take a break and then have Michael on after our sponsors, I got one more very interesting clip. It's about the U.S. patent protection for cannabis seeds, which is interesting. So, because so far there is no protection. So let's see where this is going.
Hello, I'm Molly Hughes in the Denver Post newsroom with a special report. We've created a special section of the paper that looks back at a year of legal pot. The legalization of marijuana has spawned all kinds of cottage industries. We caught up with one man who is a self-taught scientist, engineer, farmer, and cannabis geek.
I started this business in 2009 across the street in a different building, and I've held in it's 2014, so I guess 5 years. My interest is in cannabis and hemp genetics, and I work as a seed breeder where I develop and market seeds that fill a specific purpose. If they're hemp, they could be grain or oilseed varieties or fiber varieties. In cannabis varieties, resin types, it could be for THC or it could be CBD. I work as a collaborator with the University of Colorado at Boulder on the Cannabis Genomic Research Initiative, the CGRI. And that project is, in its scope, is intended to map the cannabis genome, that is to identify the individual genes and to locate them on the chromosomes down to that level. It's a body of work that has been done for most large crops like corn and wheat. It has not been done for hemp or for cannabis. I work less and less with marijuana types and more with industrial hemp types of seed. So in the last year, we've seen the implementation of the industrial hemp rules, and the first crop has been grown in Colorado and has been harvested, and now there's a new set of rule changes that are coming down that will address some of the issues that we uncovered during this first season. But it's a very, very new industry, and it's very speculative at this point, and most of the work that's being done is really pure research rather than commercial effort. There are very few people that are doing what I'm doing. It's a slow process, it's expensive, it's very resource intensive, and the work happens over a period of many years to develop stable seed varieties, whereas growing cannabis or growing hemp for crop is a much shorter cycle and much easier to do. But it can't happen without stable seed varieties, so this has to come first.
Next month, Holmes will take the rare step of applying for a patent on the super strain he's creating. It will be the first ever to protect a cannabis plant and a first step in establishing plant breeder rights. I'm Molly Hughes in the Denver Post newsroom with this special report from DPTV.
So we'll be right back with Michael Krawitz right after these words from our sponsors.
I'm Robert Platshorn with Marijuana Facts from the Silver Tour. A new Florida study in the Journal of Molecular and Cellular Neuroscience found that cannabis can slow the effects of Alzheimer's and may in fact be able to halt it entirely. A University of Ohio study showed that people who use marijuana get Alzheimer's at a much lower rate than non-users. Learn more and support the truth at thesilvertour.org. That's thesilvertour.org.
Hi, as you know, over the next few years, the cannabis industry is going to explode into a multi-million-dollar industry. 420webdesign.com is your affordable design provider. 420 Web Design prides themselves on fair prices and a grounded staff. They listen to their ganjapreneurs' website needs. Getting into the marijuana industry doesn't need to break your bank. Our sites come with tons of features. Just a few of them include responsive designs for mobile viewers, easy to update platforms, built-in SEO and SMO tools, enterprise-level security, video tutorials, database backups, Google Maps, onboard analytics, and much more. This is backed by a decade of website design and development experience. For all of your 420 web design needs, go to 420webdesign.com. Again, 420webdesign.com. Check them out.
Have you ever had a problem with overcooking your cannabis oil? You probably wanted to rip your hair out when you burned off all the THC, right? I even cried one time when my brownies failed to make a good impression at the party. Well, I stopped crying when I found Magical Butter. Magical Butter is a device with a microprocessor-controlled program sequencer. It was designed by a scientist and a chemist to precisely extract the benefits of various herbs. Magical Butter easily makes botanical butter, oils, tinctures, lotions, sauces, and more. Magical Butter heats your oil and your herbs at the perfect temperature every time. Check us out at magicalbutter.com because it's magical. Okay, there's a lot of science and chemistry involved, but it sure works like magic.
Again, for your tinctures, butter, and oils, that's magicalbutter.com. This is a great appliance. Use coupon code LOVE to get $20 off.
This is Robert Platshorn with Marijuana Facts from the Silver Tour. According to the DEA's administrative law judge, Francis L. Young, marijuana in its natural form is one of the safest therapeutically active substances known to man. In strict medical terms, marijuana is far safer than many foods we commonly consume. Learn more and support more education at thesilvertour.org. That's thesilvertour.org.
The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio show.
Okay, we are back. Let me hook Michael Krawitz in. Michael.
Hey there, Larry.
Hey, welcome to once again to Medical Marijuana Radio. We've had you on several times over the last couple of years, but before we get into what we want to talk about tonight, I don't think we've ever talked about your background and how you became an activist and an advocate for veterans and for this plant. So give us a little background on you.
You know, if I could be allowed just a little bit of freedom here for a moment, I want to just share a thought that I was just having with you.
Sure.
And I remember a sci-fi movie I was watching where it was showing a dystopian future where marijuana was still illegal and they were hiding it. And I also remember from that same movie, the trade centers, World Trade Centers, were still standing. So, you know, the future is anything but written, I think, as we go along.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. Boy. So tell us about Michael Krawitz, and then let's talk about Veterans Affairs and your trip to the UN and all this stuff that's happening.
Sure. I grew up actually right outside of New York City in that kind of area in the 1970s. I was very much a 1970s kid, and I think pretty heavily influenced by the cannabis culture, the marijuana culture at a young age. I didn't like what I saw, you know, with where the marijuana movement had kind of gone and what had happened. You know, I came of age right at the time when the cocaine scandals hit the fan, and the Carter administration had to go back on their word, and legalization was ripped from our hands. And
right.
I think, you know, that was part of why I took the route that I did, which was to go into the Air Force. And you know, I looked at the options in front of me. I could go into college, go into debt. I could get a full-time job and maybe, you know, work my way up a chain to get a decent hourly wage, still not really making that much money in the world of things. Or I could go in the military. The military just seemed like a really good option, and that's what I went for. And it's funny how I kind of went left when the world went right, and then kind of rejoined later. And what I mean by that is, I left New York, and as I went in the military, all my friends are telling me there's no good marijuana anymore. It's really hard to find. And so I guess right around 1980, marijuana kind of went underground as I went underground. And when I emerged from the Air Force, kind of marijuana emerged in the late 1980s. I came in really. I was on a track to be a career person. I was going to be a helicopter pilot and all that, and I became injured in the Air Force, became wounded, not in the line of duty at all, but you know, they consider not in battle or anything like that, but they considered it line of duty because I wasn't doing anything wrong. I just had a misfortune, an accident, and that changed my path completely. And through process and trial and error, I actually Started out as a medical patient with really no knowledge at all about cannabis, medical cannabis, other than the marijuana, that I knew about as a kid, the kind of what I tell people, the Cheech and Chong education that I got as a kid. And when I started to learn that patients like me that had the same kind of problems that I have, got a combination of stomach injuries and artificial joint and skeletal pains and that kind of thing, and together it makes it very difficult for me to take enough pain medicine to really tolerate that I could probably take for the amount of pain that I'm in if I didn't have these stomach issues. And to read that 100 years ago there were patients just like me, and the first line medicine for that patient was cannabis. It was available in the pharmacy, everything. And that kind of history, I think, drove my activism and has driven me to try to put the medicine back in people's hands and the knowledge back in the medical field to be able to handle it. I've approached this as a human rights issue. I went to the United Nations in 1998 protesting that medicinal access is a human right and that we shouldn't be denied medicinal access to whatever we need, a doctor recommends. So that's kind of where I come in, and I'm really proud to have been part of this marijuana movement, and I've been able to affect change inside the VA by persistent action we talked a lot about on the show. So it's really been an honor and a privilege to work side by side with such great people and be part of such a great movement.
So has anything changed for the veterans? I know a couple of years ago they made a statement saying that they would not take benefits away from veterans who live in a state where medical marijuana is legal and that they are in the program. So since that statement, I know there's some misconceptions out there, because I've heard many stories about how vets are afraid that they're going to lose some of their privileges and so forth with the VA. So what's the latest on how the VA is handling medical marijuana for their vets?
Sure, I'll give you an update, but I think first it's important to make clear that there's what should be and there's what is. And the VA is this massive medical system that takes care of 25 million or so veterans. It's the biggest healthcare system in the country, and there's every kind of problem imaginable is in that system. And we're working on a lot of issues at once, but know that it's never appropriate for a doctor, inside or outside the VA, it's never appropriate for a doctor to punish a patient, to deny their medicine as a punishment or in any kind of punitive way. If they say, oh, you can't have this because you violated the rules, that should indicate to you, they've gone off the ethical track. They're no longer acting ethically. And ethics apply to every doctor, not just the doctors in the VA. But that's turned out to be our main tool, and our main success has been when we've used ethics. And the VA has not stopped since the first VA policy came out in 2010. It was updated only in minor ways in 2011. Generally, what it says is three-part. One is they warn veterans this is federal property. If you ever are in the position where you're confronted by police on this federal property, they can't prevent them from arresting you for marijuana. It's still illegal under federal law. Second part of it, which has been actually very fruitful for us in getting congressional help and for getting kind of awareness to these problems, has been the prohibition of doctors recommending cannabis. The policy was very clear that VA doctors are not allowed. It's not within their discretion to recommend cannabis. They've been threatened. And the thing that we liked about the policy, of course, is that it said very clearly that if you're using medical marijuana in a state program, it's not going to interfere in any kind of punitive way. You're not going to be punished. They'll take into consideration that you're using it under medical orders when you go inside the VA. And that little bit of protection has been really, really important. But like I said, we didn't stop there. We kept working with the VA, and the ethics committee of the VA has recently come out with new guidance. It's a thing that we've been working on for a long time, the pain contract. I know you probably remember that term. It's a real onerous document that threatens the patient in any number of ways. It's very punitive, right on its face, and in that unethical. And we've been fighting it. In the VA, we've actually made some success. The VA has removed that pain contract now, and what they put in its place is a agreement based on informed consent. And they've determined that the FDA requires informed consent if you're using controlled treatment for like pain over a long period of time, not for acute pain, not for cancer pain, but for chronic pain, chronic use over a long period of time, the FDA requires that you're warned of the special risk that entails, and you sign a document to that effect. That's the only legal requirement.
And what is that special risk that you might get, but that they can't protect you?
The special risk that the FDA assessed, I'm not a medical authority, I can't really go into it in great detail, but essentially they're saying that if you're using it short term, that's one thing, but if you're using it long term, then the risks are sufficient that the patient needs to be well, communicated very well of those risks. And, I would suppose part of it is the troubles of tolerance and a withdrawal. I would assume some of it is physical side effects of if you do tend to escalate and use more and more, there's overdose risk, things like that. I could see, their concern if that's where it ends. But the thing is, it calls for drug testing, and then it's very vague about what the drug testing will lead to. In their words, in the document, it says, if you are tested positive for illegal drugs, you'll be talked to by your doctor. Now, what does that mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, the ethical requirement is that you not be punished. The reality is a lot of doctors out there don't follow ethics. And I think that the VA needs to go in further. I think the VA needs to be very clear and tell the doctors what they're supposed to do when you test positive for drugs and how to not be punitive, because it's hard. I mean, a doctor isn't given a hell of a lot of guidance on this. And in that vacuum, their imagination runs wild.
So at this point, Michael, the VA docs can make a diagnosis. Let's use PTSD as an example. They can make a diagnosis of that, and then I believe a vet who lives in a medical marijuana state could take that diagnosis to a doctor that is not in the federal government and then get into the programs. That's the way I know that it works here in New Mexico. So is that pretty much the way it is elsewhere?
With one exception that I'll go to in a minute, but essentially that's it. A veteran, you don't even need to be diagnosed with that medical condition inside the VA. Just see a doctor outside the VA and be diagnosed with a medical condition or be recommended cannabis, as required by that state law. And then if it really, hopefully, will never run into an issue at the VA. But if you do run into an issue, you get drug tested, you're asked about it in some way, then you answer by giving them the documentation. And of course, if you're in some treatment where the cannabis might be relevant in some way, a heart condition, psychiatric treatment comes to mind, you may find that it's necessary and needed for your treatment to be open about the cannabis use. But that's where I draw the line. I tell patients, if the doctor doesn't need to know, don't tell them. Follow that great need-to-know doctrine. And the one exception that we've got, Illinois, is a really neat one that I'm waiting for some data on to see how it's working. But we got it written into the law. They try to be extra conservative by requiring you to have your primary care doctor recommend cannabis. We told them that their primary care doctor, if it's a VA doctor, can't do it. So they turned around and said, okay, just turn in your medical file. So in Illinois, if you're a veteran, you're being diagnosed at the VA, like you said, for post-traumatic stress, just take your medical file down to the state, and theoretically you should be getting issued the card within the parameters of Illinois state laws condition.
Which is the way it is here as well. I believe, the way the law in New Mexico reads is that a psychiatrist, psychiatric nurse practitioner are the ones that need to make the recommendation for cannabis. Now, from what I understand, the diagnosis can come from the VA's doctors, and then that can be taken, I believe, to even a regular doctor here, as long as they see that the diagnosis came, from the proper source. So, as far as Illinois is concerned, I'm not really up on what's happening. They don't have dispensaries yet, right? But the law is sort of enacted.
The law is enacted, and like I said, I don't have a heck of a lot of data yet to really tell me how it's working. There's several states like that are in limbo, and then several that kind of aren't even there yet that are working on just creating their conditions lists and stuff, like Guam, and Maryland's just coming out of that process.
So what has to happen is that our president of the United States and the people who he directs needs to deal with the Schedule 1, okay? I'm surprised that we're not closer. We may be closer, but it may be just very quiet right now. But you know, here we are allowed to have medical marijuana in certain states, and we're almost up to half at least now. And then, of course, they're allowing us to have recreational if the states vote that way. They came out and said Native Americans can grow and sell marijuana on their land, which is federal land. So what, you know, so when are they going to change the schedule? Because if you know, this is all too new, but if you go to a Native American reservation or pueblo or whatever, and they're selling marijuana, you know, you're okay there, but which is federal land, but then when you come back to across the line to your state, there could be problems. So we're getting, I'm feeling double messages and double meanings from what the federal government has been announcing. Where do you think this is going to go, and how soon do you think they're going to deal with the Schedule 1?
Well, I can tell you this. If you've been following what's going on closely, like with the case that came up in Sacramento, the federal court case where testimony and evidence was presented against the schedule number based on the federal government's actions currently. If you've been following the court cases that are emerging now where states are suing Colorado based on the treaty that you know, they want the government to shut it down. If you're following these kind of things, you can certainly feel that this is all coming to a head. But I have to say, to directly answer your question, I kind of reverse it. And I look at this like, how long can the government really hold up Schedule 1 before it really does damage to the entire Controlled Substances Act? Because I think if you go into court with a successful argument against Schedule 1, I think that's going to, at least in some ways, derail the entire Controlled Substances Act. And the thing is, in most cases, for most people, for most substances, the Controlled Substances Act actually works. So if you're going to destroy that just to save marijuana, illogical and irrational placement. You know, we put in a request to the Attorney General, we being veterans from across the country, a small coalition representing, you know, hopefully the mainstream feelings of the vets that we've been talking to throughout the entire country. And we presented several constitutional arguments to the Attorney General, you know, very straightforward, you know, that we don't have freedom of speech to talk to our doctor, that we don't have the equal protection under the law because it varies by state to state instead of just one policy for all veterans, etc. And we presented to the Attorney General under the rule that he can deal with cannabis as a precursor. Now think about this is kind of an interesting thing because we all know that Marinol is THC, a synthetic version of THC. Therefore, we all know that Marinol could easily be made as a generic with regular THC if it's synthetic THC. And if we all know that, then we all know that marijuana can be used to make Marinol. And if marijuana can be used to make Marinol, then marijuana, by law, by definition, is a precursor to Marinol. And by law, by definition, it has to be a less restrictive schedule number than the thing it's a precursor of, or the same. So that means it would have to be at least 3 or less restrictive right off the bat just to satisfy the precursor requirement. And that's what we hit him with. And the precursor requirement doesn't have anything to do with, you know, is it a medicine? Is it not a medicine? Does it have medical value? Does it not have medical value? None of that matters. All that matters is it a precursor? And I think it's illogical and stupid to say that it's not a precursor. And further, we gave them the DEA's arguments that they made again and again, how it's actually THC, how it's the legal medical marijuana. You know how the DEA goes on and on about Marinol as a good drug, and then immediately goes into how terrible regular THC is.
Right. How that there's no medicinal value to natural THC, but the Marinol has medicinal value. But the people that use it say not as good as the plant.
Yeah, never. You know, you can't replace the plant. Like you try to replace an orange with a vitamin C pill. It's it's just a kind of an absurdity.
Well, there's only 2 years left in President Obama's administration. I hope he's not waiting till the last minute to do this, because I think there's a lot of damage that can be done to veterans and other people in the next 2 years.
Well, I think the answer is in the treaties, and you know, it's a good segue into what I'm doing this week. I'm going up to the UN, I know, but even more than that, it's relevant anyway, and it's becoming more and more relevant because we as United States citizens, and this is, I've looked at this for a long time. I've talked to a lot of people, and we have disdain for the international bodies. The UN we think of as an entity that opposes our way of life. We look at the UN and the treaties as something that is completely irrelevant to us. And you know what? In most cases, on most terms, I would agree with all those things, but not with the drug treaties that we were champion of, that we've been like the carrot and stick of the drug treaties. We've been the stick and the carrot, for years and decades. So I think that with the drug control treaties, it's a real dance for our country. And we're dancing in between two different kind of worlds. On one side, we're part of this Latin American and South American, what is it? The
Uruguay and all that?
Yeah, it's the Organization of American States, OAS, and that's come out with some great statements, some good, really logical stuff. And then on the other side, we're in the G8, and we're part of this cabal of the most idiotic and repressive thoughts, possible. China and Russia are still, they want to go back to the old drug war. They don't even like the new drug war. So yeah, I think that's the dynamic, is how do we, right now the United States is making a real dance and trying to say, oh yeah, there's all kinds of room in the treaty to do this. But it's not that long ago that we were telling people there was no room in the treaty to do anything. Mm-hmm. So it's really a crisis, I think, for the administration. I really don't know what they could do without, really doing something dramatic, a presidential action with a congressional action, combined and then taking that whole thing to the UN and really standing behind it. I mean, that's quite a lot to ask of anybody.
Isn't there a UN representative that has come out so brashly against what we've been doing here with lightening up on marijuana? I'm not sure of the guy's name, but he's from somewhere in Europe, and he's one of the heads.
You got to realize that the United Nations drug control treaties and the whole thing, it's not like some of the other stuff you've heard over the UN that, there's no blue hats. It's not enforced. It's not policed. It's just a agreement amongst nations. We piss other nations off by not following it, which has its own, repercussions. But there's no direct thing other than them yelling at us. And
I lost you, Mike. You there? Hang on, folks. Let's see. Mike, can you hear me, buddy?
Listening?
I lost you. Go ahead and repeat the last 30 seconds.
Yeah, so just to go back a few seconds, we can't get arrested, or there's no blue hats coming or anything like that. But there is a program built into the United Nations to yell at us, and there's a program called the International Narcotics Control Board, and then there's the United Nations Office of Drug Control and Crime. And these are, they're committees, and they're groups made up of and set up by committees of all these nations. 50-something nations, I think, join together on the commission that handles drugs. It's the Commission on Narcotic Drugs. And there's, 10, 20 main employees in the UNODC. I think there's 13 members of the International Narcotics Control Board. And they've yelled at us and said all kinds of things. But then we turned around and had our representative, Brown Lee, from the State Department, say how he felt this was perfectly well within the treaties. It was just experimentation, nothing to worry about. This is it's certainly still illegal at the federal level, and we're monitoring what's going on, and we'll report back to you. Essentially, is what he was.
So you're going to another session or some kind of meeting at the UN coming up soon?
Yeah. The long and short of it, I guess, is we got a big, huge drug summit that comes up every 10 years or so. And after a lot of negotiations, they've set the thing up for 2016. And we're all already gearing for 2016. And there's a lot of meetings between now and then. One of the big ones coming up in March is that Commission on Narcotic Drugs over in Vienna, Austria. But in the meantime, and that for the matter of that big drug summit, that'll be in New York at the UN headquarters. So we've now started to work as non-governmental organizations. That's essentially us. Any of the marijuana organizations, any of the groups that we work with, not-for-profit organizations are non-governmental organizations. And as a group, we're communicating with the UN in New York and in Vienna, setting up, a relationship on how we're going to be able to present our information, how we're going to be able to interact with all these countries as they come in to make their deliberations. And that's basically what we're working on. We've got this week, like 3 different meetings coming up in New York that I'm attending. A lot of discussion amongst the larger NGOs like the Drug Policy Alliance, Open Society Institute, International Drug Policy Consortium, Human Rights Coalition, things like that, getting together with as big a tent as possible. Any NGOs that listening, anybody can join up, go to the, find the New York NGO committee, seek me out if you can't figure it out. And everybody is welcome in this. This is a big tent, but we're trying to, kind of channel ourselves in a way that we can communicate efficiently with the UN. And this week we have the NGO committee meeting itself on Thursday and a UN meeting on Friday that we're having discussing, again, the terms of our NGO involvement as we get into this UN drug summit. It's a series, an ongoing series of a dialogue. You have a panel, they have a panel, you have a panel, they have a panel. That's how you talk to the UN.
Mm-hmm. So with all the progress, and we've made a lot of progress, and when I say we, I mean you and the kind of guys that are out there in the trenches all the time. I just mouth off here and try to keep people interested, but we've made a lot of progress, okay? And we're going to have a general election for a new president in 1 year. And what would happen to all this progress if the Republicans should get back in? If we should get a Jeb Bush or a Mitt whatever his name is, Romney, what happened to all this?
Well, that's something I've given a lot of thought to. As a matter of fact, I haven't done a lot of radio shows lately. Anybody that's listening, that's a regular listener, I apologize for the hiatus, but I will be back. About it, not very far into Colorado's new law, I had Eric Sterling on the show, and I asked him, what would happen tomorrow, what would happen next year if the government foreclosed on this. It was a very real consideration. And his answer, I think, was very, it made me feel like there's a lot of hope in everything, and it's not as cut and dry as you might imagine, because what he was describing was law that hinges on 2 things. One, how long it's been tolerated and enacted and undergoing, actual public, obvious, open, and, open for business, use of this law. And then the second thing was the response, the government actually working with these various state governments, giving them, different guidance, together with the fact that it's being tolerated, and there's no federal government going to court trying to shut it down. They didn't do that with Prop 215 either. They tried it with the assisted suicide up in Oregon, and they lost that. Mm-hmm. And I think that might have burned their nose. They never tried it with any of these other things. They've tried other tactics, scare tactics, individual patients, collectives getting shut down in droves, lots of things. DEA is very active in enforcing that federal policy. That's what they go tell the UN. Hey, it's still illegal in the U.S. Look at all these collectives we arrested. What are you talking about? So it's funny how that all works out, but it's not so funny for the collectives and the individuals and the people that are caught, the Montana people and the Washington State people and other, where there's dissent, the DEA comes in and feeds and fills their jails. And that's kind of where we're at right now. Mm-hmm. If the government were to try to shut it down, there's only 2 choices, 3. One, the legal route, and I just described that. 2 is actually taking their DEA agents and going and rounding up people. It's tough for them to do that. They just don't have the manpower to do that. It's just like alcohol prohibition. And the third thing is, using the states, having the states' will to enforce this and comply with this. And I got to say, I've been trying to listen to a lot of stuff, even listening to the news you put on. It's not coming off too bad, legalization. It's not, the house isn't on fire, and everyone sees it. There's some problems. A kid fell out a window, whatever. You got some sensational, crazy stuff that I'm sure feeds the Sabbats out there. Right. But by and large, it's been pretty dull and just a lot of fun for the people involved, and a lot of gambling for the investors, and mm-hmm. a lot of work for the bubble bubble hash makers. Whatever,
Right.
you know?
Hash is still illegal in some states, by the way. So we only have a couple minutes left. Michael, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about or promote, where you'll be or when your shows are coming back and so forth?
Well, I would ask everybody to support this effort that we're working under Congressman Rohrabacher and Congressman Blumenauer with the MilCon VA amendment to allow Veterans Affairs doctors to recommend cannabis. That's something everybody can help. Talk to their congressman, just mention that, suggest that they support that, do whatever they can to help that pass. So that's what we would say to everybody. We're on Facebook. If you go to Facebook/VMCA, as in Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access .USA, you'll pull us right up, and you can send a message, get involved. There's a lot of information that we call out that's interesting to veterans, that's or just root information that's needed, required reading kind of stuff. Other than that, that's what we got on the Facebook page. So I just thank you, for your show. It's really great.
Thanks, man.
It's really informative, listening to your show, Larry, and really thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Well, I thank you for all your hard work and all your traveling. I just wish I had 10% of your frequent flyer mileage. Then maybe I could get from here to L.A. or something. But thanks again. Safe travel, my friend. Anytime you have anything that you'd like to talk about, give me a heads up, and let's get you back. Thank you, Michael Krawitz.
Yeah, man. One last thing, Larry.
Sure. Yeah.
You got I'm so excited. I'm resident of Virginia, and we got our 4th marijuana bill introduced. We got 4. We got a hemp bill, we got a decrim bill, and 2 medical marijuana bills. It's kind of mind-blowing in the state of Virginia to have this much proposed in the right direction at once. Man, the wind's maybe changing direction. Who knows?
Well, it's the hard work by you guys, and I thank you very much. And we'll get you back real soon. And hopefully, let me know if you're coming west, like to Denver for any events or speaking anywhere, okay? Because I would love to hook up with you. Take care, my friend.
Will do.
All right. That's Michael Krawitz, who is an incredible activist and advocate for not just marijuana, but for veterans themselves. And we'll be right back to close out the show after this piece of music, which is dedicated to those in Paris.
the medical marijuana radio, radio show.
Well, I want to thank Michael Krawitz for enlightening us on what's going on around the world and the UN and with the veterans and all that stuff. We'll have another guest on next week to talk about whatever they want to talk about. If you want to be a guest, you could certainly send us an email at info@mmjradio.com, or if you have any guest suggestions or topics. I want to thank my two radio mentors, both with the initials HS. Thank you for your inspiration. Also, don't forget my little short 5-6 minute show on canawanabuy.com. That's Wednesdays with Larawana. Wednesdays with Larawana on canawanabuy.com. The great place for all kinds of cannabis products. Fast shipping, low prices. Don't forget, if you want to hear replays, timeforhemp.com, iHeartRadio, Pothead Universe Radio, on the Roku box on the US Weed channel, and also on 420radio.org. They play the repeats as well. So we'll be back next week. Feel well, everybody.
Shalom.